When we talked about how we were going to shoot Michael Myers, we always talked about having a low camera and shooting below eye line, obviously to make him more of an imposing and threatening character. But Don Shanks was an imposing, threatening character anyway, so it didn't matter where you put the camera with Don. He had a presence when he was Michael Myers that you couldn't get past, so wherever you put the camera, it worked. Keeping Halloween 5 consistent with the overall look of the series wasn't so much of a challenge because the director, Dominic Gerard, specifically wanted the film to have a slightly different visual style to the other Halloweens. And whilst we stayed fairly true to style in terms of doing nighttime's blue and the density of the shadows and everything else, we did stray off a little bit so that we tended to use coral filters and use a lot more warm light rather than cool light in some of the scenes inside the house. And that really translated through the way we used lenses and the lenses we chose to shoot it, because he wanted very wide lenses with low angles and big field of view. So that also dictated a different lighting style because, especially when you're shooting horror, you don't want front light because it gives everything away. You want edge light and backlight. And when you're shooting big wide-angle lenses low on the floor and seeing a massive expanse of each set, you've got to be really creative the way you come up with your lighting. Well, Halloween 5 was really my first Hollywood film, if you want to call it that. And originally I turned it down. I got a call from my agent, who was Robbie Lance in New York. He told me about it, and I turned it down primarily because it was going to occur at the same time as my wife was having our second child. And it really came about through the director and Mustafa calling me and having a chat to me because they both wanted me to shoot it. And eventually we worked out an arrangement where Sue would end up going to Salt Lake City, and our second son, Paul, was born in Salt Lake City during the shooting of Halloween 5. Hence his middle name is Michael.
Get down!
I really wasn't terribly familiar with the series, and I had to look at all 4 previous episodes, especially the incoming Halloween 5 had to match into what was outgoing from Halloween 4. But right from the start, Dominic and I really hit it off, and I loved his sensibility, the way he was trying to bring a European flavour to the film. And I also liked the fact that he was talking about using lots of wide-angle lenses, even though from an execution point of view, it made my life incredibly difficult because there was never anywhere to put a light. And everything had to be lit essentially from the camera to look like it was coming from behind the actors. And it made the lighting extremely difficult, but on the other hand, it made it very easy because there was nowhere to put lights, so you couldn't put a lot of lights up. You had to be really creative. We spent a lot of time talking about lenses, about how we were going to move the camera, about where the lenses would be placed in the set, and we spent a lot of time on location, going through and blocking out and staging how we were going to do the scenes before we actually got there. But I really tuned into his sensibility about how he wanted to tell the story, and I loved the fact that he wanted to try to push it off in a slightly different direction to the other films. The knife flashes and all the pumpkin sequence in the opening was shot, I guess, by a title company, but I had nothing to do with those. But however, I did like them, and I thought it was a fantastic opening to the film. But no, I didn't shoot those.
I never should have let my parents talk me into leaving. I don't know what I was thinking.
You're afraid.
I am not.
You're afraid the whole thing might start to happen again.
Working in Salt Lake City was a sort of an unusual choice, I thought. But the thing that was great is we had a fantastic location for the scene where Michael Myers gets blown up and comes out of the tunnel into the stream and floats down the stream and comes across the guy in the cabin. Our location for that was up in the mountains near Snowbird and Alta, and it was a fantastic location. And the house that they found was sort of unusual because the original house was so tiny. And I actually lived 4 years in Pasadena, just around the corner from the original Halloween house, and it was really tiny compared to the one we used in Halloween 5. Halloween 5 was massive, it was a 3-story house. But it worked out great for the way we ended up telling the film, and it worked out great for the laundry chute sequence as well, because that wouldn't have worked in the original house.
What am I doing? I hate cats.
The other primary location there was the farm. The farm was good, although we had to plant all the pine trees. They were brought in by the greensmen and planted for us to drive the car through and mow them down on the chase sequence. But the locations were generally pretty good, and in terms of architecture, I mean, the only real architecture was that we had to worry about was the house, and I thought the house worked great.
Why are you protecting him?
Donald Pleasance was a funny character. He was a real easygoing guy. He was friendly. He came in every morning. He greeted the crew, unlike a lot of actors, and he was so different to the character that he portrayed on the screen. But anything you wanted him to do, he would do. And there are quite a few scenes in it where I had him in very little light. And especially when he was doing the scenes walking through the house looking for Michael Myers. I would walk through the pathway that he was going to take in the film on camera, and then I would show him where the light was going to hit him, and he had to play that light. And he did it beautifully, and there were never any complaints. There was never, oh, you know, no one's going to see me or any of that stuff. And every time he got to the light and I needed him to play his head through a little sliver of light that would be coming from somewhere, he did it. And he was fantastic to work with, a real gentleman. Danielle Harris blew us all away. I mean, she was 12 years older when we did Halloween 5, and she was incredible. And I mean, all the running and jumping and going down the laundry chute and all that stuff, and running through the woods. And she was never any complaints. She was always happy, always in a good mood. The stamina that she showed on that film was pretty inspirational to everyone on the crew. One of the things Don Shanks brought to Halloween 5 was, obviously he's Native American, and he and Dominic in particular had a lot of discussions about Native American mythology, and some of Don's movements were grounded in his culture. He would walk through a scene and Dominic would ask him to do something, and then he would come up with some sort of a twist that had a cultural relevance to him. So I think his portrayal of Michael Myers is a little bit different to a lot of the other ones that you see, and it's hard to put your finger on it. But I remember them quite often sitting at lunch talking through Native American mythology and the culture and the history and movement and dance and that sort of thing, and trying to bring that into Michael Myers' character. So I don't know if there was a real attempt to push it off into some sort of mythology, but I do know that he was drawing on cultural references to portray Michael Myers. The stalking and the tracking of Ellie through the house, I do recall Dominic wanted that to be bright. He didn't want that to be dark, so that it wasn't going to give anything away. Although the way it was finally edited, obviously you knew something was going to happen just around the corner. But the idea with that was that it would be, feel open and bright, and it was quite colourful compared to a lot of the other scenes. But the location was a house not far from the Myers house, and it was, normal location and pretty easy to work in, and terrified a lot of the neighbours because they didn't like seeing Michael Myers wandering around the neighbourhood and hiding in their bushes. The Ellie scene was intended to make the audience feel safe and secure, like it was going to be a false scare, and that really came from Dominic. And I felt that the house should be a lot darker. And when I first lit it, I lit it much darker than it appeared in the film. But when we started shooting, Dominic and I went through, and I walked him through how I was going to do it, and he definitely wanted it brighter there, because he wanted the audience to feel safe and secure, and to feel that there was something coming, but it wasn't going to be Ellie getting stabbed. And I know from a lot of things I've read online from fans, they hate the fact that she was killed so early in the film. They hate the fact that she was killed at all, but killing her off that early in the film certainly upset a lot of the fans, and a lot of her fans especially. But yeah, the intention there was definitely, and it came from Dominic, that he wanted that to feel bright and cheery and happy, and that the scare was just going to be one of her friends would pop out and surprise her.
No!
Yeah, the barn sequence was a challenge. When we shot that, we were seeing the entire barn. There was literally nowhere to hide lights in that. So I came up with the idea of lighting the whole thing through the slats in the barns and from the outside. And the only thing that we actually did light was when we got into the close-ups. You know, the pitchfork coming through the body, and all the visual effects shots had to be lit for close-up. But all the wide shots had to be lit from outside, and it was a real challenge, because that barn didn't have there wasn't a lot of opportunity to light in there, and so it was one of those situations where light and smoke provide the answer. Yeah, the finale scene was actually quite difficult to pull off, because the way that was shot in a practical location, so it was very difficult to light, and it was a lot of Steadicam. So and I didn't want to use the overhead fluorescent lights. I wanted to light it myself, so that it had a little bit of mood and atmosphere to it. Dominic wanted it to be one long continuous shot, and doing that in a practical police station with a very narrow hallway and nowhere to hide lights made it really difficult. And like I said, I didn't want to use overhead fluorescence, because that would have destroyed the whole look of it. So yeah, that was a tough one to pull off. Everyone was having a good time, and to be honest, a lot of that came from the example that was set by Danielle. And given that she was, a 12-year-old who was, in the lead role in the film, that pretty much set a tone for the whole film. And we had some tough nights, and we had some funny nights, and we had some great nights, and normal for a film. But yeah, everyone was fantastic to work with. They really were. The Man in Black was a bit of an enigma. None of us really knew who the Man in Black was. And my favourite thing was when he got off the bus and kicked the dog. That was my favourite bit, is why is he kicking the dog?
Redfield, Evanston, and then final destination.
If someone knew who the Man in Black was, they certainly didn't explain it to me or to Dominic or to anyone else. But no, the Man in Black was a bit of a mystery, and actually still is. One of the sequences that people talk about a lot, and I get asked a lot of questions on, is the laundry chute scene. That was a real challenge, because first off I had to work out how the heck I was going to light that, but secondly, how we're going to shoot it. We came up with a set of storyboards, and the guy who really worked all that out was Brent Swift, the production designer. He took the storyboards and came up with a series of set pieces, and I think somewhere in the 30 to 35 range, little set pieces, pieces of the shoot lying on its side, pieces that we could roll a skateboard down with the camera on it, pieces that we could dolly along the side with the side cut out, all sorts of stuff that we could use to capture Danielle in the shoot. And I think we shot the entire laundry shoot scene in one day, or it might have been 2 days, but there were a lot of shots to make that work. And but it was it turned out fantastically well. And there are a few shots in there that don't appear in the film. There was one where Michael Myers stabs through the chute and the knife actually goes into Danielle's leg. And, because it was a fake leg, but it was so graphic that it had to be dropped out. But yeah, that sequence was really good fun to film. Really, the credit for that sequence really should go to Brent Swift, the production designer, because he did an awesome job working out all the pieces that we needed to make that work and to fit it to the storyboard.
This time, he's back with a vengeance. Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers.
When I saw the final film, I was really quite happy with it. I thought it was well cut together. I think the story was well told. I thought all the performances were quite good, and I thought it did the job that a Halloween film was supposed to do, and it came across with a slightly different feeling to it because of Dominic's approach and wanting to push it off in a more Euro style. Now, some people don't like that, but to me, it was better than imitating what had come before, and it just gave it a slightly different twist. But I was really happy with it, and to this day, people ask me about how I feel about it now, and I'm still quite proud of that film. I think knowing the challenges that I had in that film, just looking at it from a cinematography perspective, I'm very proud of that film. I think it was one of the early films that I did, and I'm still regarded as one of the great looking films that I've shot.